Cash Color Cannabis, a high level of conversation on livehip-hop-daily.tv. As y'all know, we back here on a beautiful Tuesday evening in the Castleberry district. And tonight, rather than go through my intro, I'm just going to cut right to the show. You know, I think I have some amazing guests on tonight, and we're going to discuss politics in Georgia and some of the upcoming elections, some of the things we should be looking forward to. I want to discuss criminal reform. I want to discuss cash bail. I want to discuss a lot of things that be on the minds of people who come by my show and people who vote. You know what I mean? So we all have people of voting age here. I'm gonna allow y'all to ask some questions a little bit later towards the night. But in the meantime, I want to introduce my guests. So we're gonna start on our right here with my man Maxwell Ruppersburg. Maxwell, introduce yourself.
Hey, glad to be here. My name is Maxwell Ruppersburg.
Ruppersburg, excuse me.
Yep. No worries. So I'm with Reform Georgia, and we're a nonpartisan advocacy group that's working to build a better justice system and end mass incarceration in Georgia. Oh,
that's right up my alley, and also nonpartisan is right up my alley. Next up, I got my man, Attorney Gerald Griggs. Attorney, how you doing, sir?
Great to be here. It's great to be here with such fine activists and engagers in the political process. Right now I'm representing myself because I'm not nonpartisan at this point because we had a big election in Georgia tonight, and we have a war coming in November, and so we have to take off our nonpartisan hats and get real about what's about to happen in Georgia. So I'm here as just myself, Attorney Griggs.
And I have my good friend Nicole Buffong here. Nicole, introduce yourself.
So my name is Nicole Buffong. I am the founder of Cannabis Connection World and co-creator of Georgia Votes for Bud campaign, which is a nonpartisan campaign that focuses on safe access for patients here in Georgia to get access to their medicine and statewide decriminalization. As well as ancillary job education.
And last but not least, I have my good friend Cass Odum, man. We done talked on the phone. We done did a whole lot of yelling, cryings, and lovings, man. That's my buddy right here. Cass, introduce yourself, man.
Hello, greetings. I'm Cass Odum. I am the National Director of Public Policy and Research for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Art 420 as well. I'm also the Policy Director for Colorado Black Women for Political Action, so I have the lovely experience of having lived in a live cannabis legal state. So I bring all that to par with what's going on in our current election atmosphere. I've also worked with Stacey Abrams. I was in her inaugural class of the Blue Institute, so I am a fan.
Oh.
And I am a partisan when it comes to supporting Leader Abrams.
So
that's who I am.
That is no problem.
But I understand, Mecca.
I understand.
In more ways than one.
Exactly. We don't have to share our shared issues with certain people, man. But they should bring them phones down. So let's get right to it. The biggest thing happening in Georgia coming up is the governor's race. It's actually a national conversation at this point. Yes. Stacey Abrams is running on the Democratic ticket, and as of a couple of minutes ago, former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be running as Republican. Let's start this conversation off. What are your feelings about our current available candidates? Like, what are your feelings about both candidates, and how do you feel about the upcoming race? And anybody could jump in.
I would like to jump in and just say that I'm not a big fan of either candidate on the GOP side, but I would like to say that Cagle pretty much got trumped with what we're seeing in politics today. Pun intended. We're having Republicans recording themselves at every opportunity and committing such heinous acts that they're really making our democracy retarded. And so I think it's incumbent upon everyone who has a voice in what's going on in America, for people of color, for whatever your flagship issues are, to make sure that you're heard, to make sure that you vote, and to make sure that everyone in your immediate circle votes. We also need to make sure that expungement efforts are really near and dear to us, because there's a great deal of folks in America who cannot vote because of our drug laws. Let's just keep it real. So. Yeah.
For me personally, I also didn't mention, as I'm the Georgia chapter president for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, which is a nonprofit organization, and we have 19 chapters now nationwide, including Jamaica. But as a leader for that type of organization here in Georgia, and as a THC card holding patient, it is life or death for me. Like, staying in Georgia, if we elect the wrong governor in November, means that my risk of going to jail or prison for trying to access the plant that I need to fight my disease, it just doesn't make sense. So I would have to become a medical refugee, leave the state, find somewhere else to live, because it wouldn't be worth the risk of me going to jail or prison, and continue the cycle for another 4 years of trying to get access. And so that's what it is in Georgia. If you didn't know, right now you can legally possess 20 fluid ounces of the cannabis oil, but there's nowhere legal for the patients to get it in the state. So over 4,000 people have registered with the state since 2015 to hold a THC card, and they have to commit a crime in order to get their medicine. So based on how our current governor set up the law.
That's fellas, how do you feel about the current candidates running for governor right now? Maxwell, how about yourself?
Well, from a policy standpoint, I feel much better about Abrams.
Okay.
I think she's demonstrated a more balanced approach towards policymaking. And on the issue of cannabis, she's the only one that had really been in the landscape that had spoken to actually looking at real reforms. Decriminalization, full medical, and looking at legalization for adult use. We've seen just kind of crumbs from the table come from the GOP candidates.
Yeah.
The Libertarian candidate was fully on board, but he's not getting votes. Kemp, recently came out with a position stating that he was favorable to, access to medical cannabis, low THC oil. But I think a lot of these are just kind of publicity stunts.
I agree. I totally agree, because I felt like we ran down this road with the mayoral race last year when I watched 12 people in the city council vote for something I'm pretty sure they weren't for. But I knew after the 12th vote was casted and I saw Keisha Lance Bottom say, reluctantly, I'll do it,
right,
that, you kind of see where the vote's going. And that the people, again, my audience, these people vote, and you definitely need their support. But I would want it to be honest. How do you feel about the upcoming candidates?
Well, there's only one candidate in the race. I'm just going to be realistic. That's why I had to take my other hat off, because in that arena, I couldn't make this pronouncement. But, having had to sue Brian Kemp 5 times to put voters back on the rolls, if you're into rolling us back to 1950 or 1850, then you support Brian Kemp. But if you're about progressive policies and actually moving Georgia forward, continuing to be the #1 state for business, and actually being a reformer that takes it a step further than his previous governor, then you vote for Stacey Abrams. I've known Stacey Abrams since I was 19 years old. I met her at Dr. Janetta Cole's house when Dr. Cole was my anthropology teacher, and she was a first-year law student. And Dr. Cole said, this will be the next governor of the state of Georgia. And so I've been in Stacey's camp a long time. I've known her a long time. I've followed her a long time, and I will be in her corner. So this conversation begins and ends with Stacey Abrams, and hopefully Georgians will get out. They will make sure they're registered to vote, and they will vote in record numbers, because this particular election, like I was telling members of this panel, is now Obama versus Trump in Georgia. And we have to have the same energy that we had voting for Obama the first time to elect the first female African-American governor in the country, but more importantly, the first African-American governor in the history of the great state of Georgia, the 13th colony, the penal colony, and one of the hotbeds of Confederacy. So we need to not turn the clock back. We don't need to vote for an individual who may have a robe in his closet. We need to vote for Stacey Abrams come November the 6th, and I'm just going to keep it real.
No, you got a good point, because when I was doing voter registration, I worked for Work for Progress. This is in 2014 or 15. Regardless, I was the guy who had to drop off the voter registration forms at Brian Kemp's office. And I remember walking in his office and wondering to myself, how do you keep order of all this? It's just paperwork everywhere. It's almost like you don't care. And then the news stories start coming out of losing forms. 40,000 forms, man.
Yes.
And my first thought was, if I would have lost one, that's $200 a form. How did you get past not having to pay a fine is a whole nother story, but I don't want to get down that road. I do understand your issues with Brian Kemp. Again, if you want to make sure that you keep people on the rolls, that's somebody you don't want to vote for. because he's not. Oh, he's perfectly fine with you not being there. One of the key things that's important to me, and I'm sure it's important to a lot of people in my audience today, is criminal reform and criminal justice reform, which is the reason I wanted Maxwell here. Criminal justice reform should be something that's a hot button topic on both of those candidates' plates. Which candidate do you feel coming up in November is the strongest when it comes to criminal justice reform? And when I say criminal justice reform, I mean reform about the system itself, cash bail, things like that. Like, who do you feel like is the strongest person on that side of things? Oh yes, go ahead. He's dying.
I think it's pretty cut and clear that Brian Kemp has come out with trying to play the law and order position, which he's been doing. Yeah. Wants to crack down on immigrants just trying to be here, work. Wants to crack down on everyone. So I don't really trust him to advance any social justice reforms or criminal justice reforms. I mean, Deal actually tried to push some things forward, and people have to give him a little bit of credit for it. I think we do sometimes begrudgingly. Yeah. Right. But Kemp has not been on that side of the table, even within their own party. And Abrams has obviously been open to it. Yeah. She's not racing into the opening saying let's legalize or let's ban cash bail. But she's the right person to see any of those things go forward, I would say.
Awesome, man.
I definitely agree, with her being an attorney as well as an advocate. I think that she will continue to progress the profound changes in the system that this previous governor made. Again, I don't really give him credit for anything, but I will give him credit for criminal justice reform. So hats off to Governor Deal. But I think that Brian Kemp, in playing the law and order card, will try to roll back the progress of the criminal justice reform we've seen, and will become more draconian in his measures. So I think it's a clear choice, a clear contrast in the candidates there. I think that Leader Abrams is open to more progressive ideas that social justice organizations will put on her platform. But I think it's a clear choice between having someone who has a mindset of Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions or someone having the mindset of progressive policy. I'm just keeping it real.
No, people. I didn't know his middle name was Beauregard.
His name though. Like every time he says it's
Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions.
Yes.
It makes you feel like it makes you feel like he has a mustache and he goes like this on a regular basis.
Like Candyland from Django.
That is hilarious, man.
So I mean, it's clear that when we're talking about criminal justice reform, she will be progressive. I think that a majority of the district attorneys that I've spoken to in this state are supportive of the previous measures that have been done by this governor. So if Brian Kemp wants to be law and order, he might want to go talk to PAC, who has stood behind the reforms that Governor Deal has put forward and will stand behind the reforms that Governor Abrams, Leader Abrams, Governor Abrams will be putting forward.
Yes.
Okay. Right. How about yourselves?
I mean, it's obvious. Just like the gentlemen say, because of the position that I'm in with the nonprofit as the leader in the state, I have to stay bipartisan. And being in media, you have to stay bipartisan. But I'm out here doing everything I can to educate the voter. That's the point. I will let you make your own decisions. I will lay out plainly for you what this candidate says and what this candidate says, and let you decide. Because I don't want to. I can't make the vote for you. And I don't want to force you to either way, but I'm hoping that as educated voters, we can make the right decision. Once we're informed, then we're empowered to make the right decision. So I'm doing everything I possibly can to register new voters out here. That's what the campaign is about. Talking to these young people, getting them educated so that they can be empowered to make that decision. And some people that are close to me, I have a 19-year-old good friend of the family that refuses to vote because she says it's all corrupt. I said, well, vote for me. Vote so that I don't have to leave the state, because that's what it comes down to, for me. And I'm not the only person in that boat that would have to look at where they would be able to have safe access. How do they avoid going to jail? To access this plan. So the choice is obvious for me as well. I'll let you assume who I'll be voting for in November.
Vote for Stacey Abrams.
And there's no problem saying that. You can speak openly about who you want to vote for. You brought up a good topic though. voter registration. Now, doing voter registration, I hate to admit this out loud, I hope my mom's not watching, I was very apathetic about voting prior to me actually doing voter registration. Just growing up, I swear to goodness, I came this close to voting for George W. Bush, and it had nothing to do with his qualifications, everything to do with the fact that he was a C student. I was like, I'm a C student. Let's see how that works. You know what I'm saying? But after doing voter registration, I really got involved in really learning about how government works, which had me, again, zooming in on the fact that I'm walking into this man's office and I'm looking at this huge mess of paperwork. We have another Secretary of State that's about to be elected as well.
They got voted on tonight. Oh, yeah. It was only Republican candidates.
That's So we have a Secretary of State. We now have a new Secretary of State. It's very important that we know who the Secretary of State is, because now you're talking about, again, not just voter registration, but if we are going to get into the conversation of legalization or even expanding medical marijuana and allowing actual dispensaries to be here, licensing. That's right. Let's speak about the importance of the Secretary of State and one, knowing who the person is and what they do, and how we can, I guess, how can we still operate with being that we do have a person who is a member of the GOP in place now? Like, how do we still operate on what we care about, which is making sure people are on these roles and making sure that when the time does come, the licensing is available for all and not just for a small amount of people.
Yeah, and I think that Ruppersburg was the one who just won, and his platform was to advance the vote for everyone and to move towards paper ballots. So he's a step away from the measures that we've seen from Brian Kemp and Karen Handel. So I think he is as progressive a conservative can be on the issue of access to the ballot. Now, with regard to licensing, I don't know what his platform is on that. I will research that. But again, on the key issues of paper ballots to protect our election integrity and opening the access to the ballot, he has been on a platform of including all voters and not to continue the efforts of voter suppression that we saw in the previous administration.
Yeah, and we're currently seeing it. Go ahead. Okay.
I really want to hone in on how important and critical this is with the upcoming seat that's available on the Supreme Court.
That part.
The Voting Rights Act itself is laying in the balance of this current battle that we're having with the Supreme Court. So who sits in the seat of Secretary of State in Georgia means who is allowed to access voting.
Yes.
And as we fight for expungement and criminal justice reform, this person is going to be very pivotal in the outcome of our elections here in Georgia.
Across the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is a website that you could go to, guys, called cannabisvoter.info.
Okay.
Cannabisvoter.info. And it will if you give them your state, it will give you the list of your senators, the list of your representatives in each state by state, that voted for and against cannabis legislation in their current seats. And so the list is very interesting. So look up Georgia. You'll notice a very blatant color divide and party divide when it comes to those votes. And so those are the people that we live in a non-referendum state. So that means we cannot make law here in Georgia. We have to elect the right officials that will create the legislation, pass it through, and then the right governor that will sign off on it. Because it's not like we haven't had legislation that has talked about cultivation that came up in the last session. As a matter of fact, the bill that passed in the last session that legalized PTSD and chronic pain, or added them to the list of diseases that qualify you, initially had cultivation in the legislation. And the governor took one look at it and said, no, I refuse to sign this into law if it has anything that has to do with cultivation. So there are people that are making those decisions, legislators that are already elected into their offices that do support it and see the reasonable, support for it. So it's important, this governor's race.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, you 100% right. Because again, when we first had this conversation, and this roundtable sparked off a conversation that we had, was the fact that this is a national conversation that's happening as far as our governor race, which puts Georgia so on the spotlight, you know what I mean? And we really have to make sure that we are, one, electing the right person, but the person we're electing, we could actually stand behind. And I feel like the last couple of elections that I've witnessed, it was kind of like a hold your nose type deal. You know what I mean? Like, you'd hold your nose and you walk in and just say, all right, I guess I got to pick this person. how are we going to start getting people to get past the hold your nose part and not really start looking at why it's important to vote? Because I was to openly admit that it was only a few years ago that I personally didn't care. That's a telling thing. That we have a whole generation. I'm 38. We have a whole generation that's my age that still looks at voting like it doesn't matter. What can we do, I guess, going into this election to remind people that, one, voting does matter, and that we actually do need you on the rolls? Like, is it something like just stating that it's almost like Obama versus Trump? Or what can we do as far as just on the ground ourselves to make sure that people recognize how important this race is?
I think, one of the things, and I work with several organizations that do voter registration, but we got to do voter education and voter mobilization, because it's a three-pronged process. And by voter education, I mean just breaking it down to its common sense civics about what the governor does, what decisions he or she makes, and how they affect you on a day-to-day basis. And I think once you really start having that conversation, like if marijuana is not legalized in the state of Georgia, more and more brown and black folks are going to be going to prison. So you're going to be giving me a call talking about how much it costs for a retainer to keep me out of prison. That starts opening people's eyes on, it might be important to go to the polls. Like even today, my conversation with most people were, do you know that DeKalb County was electing a brand new Superior Court judge? I don't know the outcome of the race, but Tunde Akinyele and Letitia Deer were running. Those people determine whether or not you come home, whether or not you get a divorce in your favor, what your tax issue is going to be when you have a tax dispute that you have to sue in Superior Court. So it's breaking it down to its constituent parts, because people are under this misconception that the system is run by the man. No, the system is run by the voters, but when you choose not to vote, you don't know who the man is that's pulling the levers.
And that's 100% for local elections. You know what I mean? Like I'll argue all day about electoral college versus popular vote, but I can tell you right now, in a local election, you've allowed Brian Kemp to get voted in by not even knowing who he was. You've allowed certain people to get voted on to city council by not knowing who they are. So I definitely agree with you that education about politics is key right now. How do you feel, Maxwell?
All politics are local.
Yes.
And I think, we have so much education to do at the state level on just participating in a gubernatorial race, but we have people that don't, know that they can participate in electing the people who represent their neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And Atlanta has NPUs and they have elections, these neighborhood planning units, and I don't think everybody knows about those existing.
Da Vinci hates the NPU. Just FYI. Just FYI.
Not defending them. And board education. Those are huge positions that affect your children and their futures, and we get to decide who's in there. And a lot of the time, people aren't showing up for that.
That's right.
So you hand over the power if you don't participate. That's right. So whoever's organized is going to take control.
Yeah, and often, again, this is a national election, but people look at Atlanta and Georgia as two different places. You know what I mean? Like, I know what's going on in Atlanta, but most people in Atlanta can care less what's going on in Barstow County or what's going on in all these other places. I feel like that's another level that we have to get Atlanta to understand, as well as outside of Georgia, that this is a group thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not necessarily an Atlanta situation, what's going on right here. We're not just trying to guess and hope for a black mayor. Like, my biggest issue with Keisha Lance Bottoms was when I saw that, when the closer we got to that election, my biggest problem was the biggest qualification I kept hearing her have was she's the black woman, and that bothered me. That bothered me to my soul. that is the only thing you can account for. That we're bringing in Tyrese's and people from all across the country, basically to tell us that she's the black candidate. Like, tell me why she's running. Like, stop insulting my intelligence as a voter and give me a reason to vote for this woman outside of the fact that she's the black person. And I feel like we could be close to that right now again with Stacey Abrams. That I feel like Stacey has to do a better job reaching out to people again like myself, that I am a person who should be voting on a regular basis, and I do now, but I'm apathetic about voting because I feel like I get pandered to a lot. I feel like, again, you got to vote for the black person. No, I don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't necessarily mean I have to vote for him. I'm gonna vote for what, we get Killmonger? You know what I'm saying? Just because he's the black guy? Like, I'm not doing that. Like,
give me some substance.
Yes, exactly. That is what I beg for as a candidate. That part, you know, again, we can go back into the mayor race.
Exactly.
Earn my vote. Like, you know, again, and I'll be blatantly honest with you. Like, last year when we had the mayoral race, we had several mayoral candidates come through here. Kwanzaa Hall, Vincent Ford, had Chris Brown running for city council. He came through here. I wanted them to come here, and it was important for them to come here because I wanted you to take me serious and these people serious. Right. And I feel like we don't have a whole lot of that going on right now. And that's my biggest problem. I feel like that's the biggest fear I have for Stacey not winning, is that the outreach you're doing is to a certain group of people. Mm-hmm. There's only so many people who go to the gathering spot. There's only so many people who are at these places. You can come here, you know, and trust me, these people are going to walk outside and vote. Right. Like, I know this for a fact. These are registered voters sitting in my room. Right. Is there any way we could get that message out to some of these candidates as we get closer to November? Because we're going to tick away, and August is going to be right there. And what I don't want to hear is we're getting close, it's tied, vote for the black person. Right. I don't want to hear that. Right.
Well, here's the thing you have to know about politics, and I think candidates need to do a better job of this. We have the VAN, the Voter Access Network, so we know who the super voters are. Absolutely. They're going to reach out to the super voters. Mm-hmm. You know, they're trying to increase their tent of people that are going to actually vote. So for the people that are apathetic, and that's where people like myself come in.
Can you explain to them what a super voter is?
Super voter is somebody who votes in every single election, like myself. I'll vote for dog catcher. I'll vote for tag reader. I'll vote if they tell me that a fly is flying across the street. I'm gonna go vote. Right. You know, to see which fly is flying across the street. Just like today, the voter turnout was like 15%, if not lower. So they're going to reach out
so much, man.
They're going to reach out to those individuals, and with the VAN, they can come down to the street level on who on the street actually voted, and they will reach out to those individuals. So
I've been part of that.
So candidates aren't just out here the shotgun effect. They have a finite amount of resources, time and money to get to that particular voter that's going to go and push the button. Mm-hmm. So I think it's incumbent on activists and organizations to reach the recalcitrant voter, the one who says the system is broken, there's no reason for me to go to the polls. Okay. I think that's our job. And then we're going to bring the candidate in to say, listen, this is a group that has been neglected, which is what actually Trump did. He brought in a group that was not being spoken to, and he mobilized them. So I think, and I hope that the Abrams camp is doing that, but it's also incumbent upon us, the ones who are educated about the process, to reach those recalcitrant voters and make them understand that the system can work for you, but you have to make the candidate locked into a position and then hold them accountable once they're elected, just like we've been doing in Keisha Lance Bottoms.
You know, a good question. And shout out to my man DJ Nas, my man Mike over there with Hip Hop Gives Back. They do a lot of actual hands-on work with high schoolers. Mm-hmm. So that's another reason why I wanted them to come out. You talking about people who are about to be voters. They probably are dealing with something I see right now that happens on the news every day, which is politic fatigue. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you turn on the news on a constant basis, it's like, man, I just hate this. I hate everything about this. Right. I don't see anybody actually working for me. Mm-hmm. Is there a way we could actually turn back that, if anything? Like how do we interact with these new voters? How do we interact with voters who are, like you say, who are hesitant to go to the polls, who are just being tired of hearing about it?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
I think the way we do it is have politicians who are running on platforms that actually matter to people.
Yes.
You know, if you want to elect a progressive leader, they need to come out with a progressive platform, not go to the middle.
Yeah.
Not
safe ground.
Safe ground. Yeah, the strategy for years has been go to the middle, pull the people who are on the fence, but we have 85% of people not showing up.
That part.
Yeah. That's a lot of people who, if they felt like somebody gave a damn about the issues that actually affect them, they're going to get up and they're going to register, they're going to vote. Yes. So I think that's a big strategy issue, and it's a conflict that's getting
ongoing,
discussed out loud now for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the elephant in the room. A lot of the political parties are top heavy with, I hate to have to say this, old people.
Yes.
Who believe a certain policy or a certain way of doing things is the right way, and we have to now start to remove their hands from the lever of power and start taking power. Because, you know, as much as we don't like him, and it's a reason why we have politics fatigue, is because of the conversation nationally. But you have to look at how he took power. Exactly. He was an outsider. He came in speaking a language that was different from, you know, the Beltline language, and it resonated with a group of people. So how about we have a candidate that speaks a different language that resonates with progressives that speak directly to progressives, and that's not the Nancy Pelosi's of the world.
Well, I think that's something Democrats really got to work on. You know what I mean? Like me, I was a registered Democrat. I consider myself independent. You know, because I really want to. I don't feel like I have to join a gang. Like I think I'm way too old for that.
Independent ballot, which sucks.
Yeah, that part too. But I just don't want to give you a party right the second, because one thing I don't see is you don't give me an option to, like you say, the progressive. Is when Bernie Sanders was running, one of the things that ignited people about Bernie Sanders was he veered away from the quote unquote usual. And even recently we saw a candidate
Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, just recently we just saw that happen. We just saw that happen, and I'm watching Democrats be upset about watching a Democrat win. Like, you know what I mean? Like
now the whole conversation is it going to be the moderate Democrat versus the progressive Democrat?
How about be the Democrat that we actually wanted to vote on? You know what I mean? Because I got that to the point even with last year's mayoral race. Again, I'm not voting just because she's black. Like I would want to vote for somebody who I honestly want to vote for. And if I can go back, I would have gave that vote to Vincent Ford. You know what I'm saying? Like you might not have won it that night, but at least I honestly knew what you were coming from.
And the thing is, I think that what Maxwell spoke to is reaching a demographic and reaching them on their terms, speaking their language. That's part of what Georgia Votes for Bud is trying to do with the education platform, but hopefully inspire them to want to have a Georgia that supports this industry that they see growing in all these other states. Like give them an option. Like these are job opportunities. This is opportunities for you to create generational wealth for your families. You know, we're watching something come out of prohibition and create and form an industry. How many chances are people in their lifetime going to get to see something like that happen?
Or hemp. You know, like we often talk about cannabis a whole lot. You know what I mean? But hemp might be the easiest thing to slide through because it's not going to get you high, but it's something that actually can be useful on an everyday basis. You know what I mean? And
generate a few $1 billion.
That part too. And
well, the U.S. Senate passed a bill a couple weeks ago that would legalize hemp, and so it has to get through the House and then to the president. But we're closer to legalizing. He wants to separate hemp from cannabis as a Schedule I drug. So we're closer to legalizing hemp federally in this country than we have been in the last 80 years. And closer than we are to cannabis being federally legal in this country right now.
That actually bothers me too. Like it really
does. They're still trying to criminalize and demonize cannabis.
It's not even that part. It's just the people who are supporting it. Like when I looked up in, you see John Boehner's, you see Donald Trump, you saw Ronald Reagan's ex-lawyer now is co-owner of a weed grow. You know, like I'm watching the most ridiculous people now turn around and tell me we're pro-cannabis. Something else that could make me as a voter be like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't know where this is going. Like I don't know where this is going.
And I think that the real gut check on that is making sure that there's responsible governance. That follows up policy, and that's what we were sorely lacking with the ordinance that even passed here in the city of Atlanta. There was not education, and I worked very hard. Becca, I volunteered. That's the great way I met a lot of folks who are here tonight. And one thing that we didn't have was responsible governance and a plan to educate not only law enforcement but the population. So there's a real disconnect in terms of whether state law is applicable, whether city law is applicable, what are the parameters and where are the stopping and start points, and what's the decision-making aspect of that arrest or that possession charge. There's no line of demarcation. There's really no. Both law enforcement and the population has no concept of what really works with these ordinances. So if we're going to enact these ordinances, if we're going to do the work even as activists, we have to also follow that up, making sure we're knocking on that person's door, that county commissioner, that city council person, saying, okay, we did this, but what's your follow-up? What's your follow-through? Have you met with the police commissioner? Have you met with the mayor? What's going to happen? And hold their feet to the fire. And that those people should not be elected officials again.
Somebody's downstairs. Can you go open the door?
Thank
you. Appreciate that.
I feel very strongly about that.
No, I totally agree. Now, what I don't want to do is bogart the questions. That's why again I invited the people out who I invited out. I feel like these are people who have real questions. So I would love to turn the mic over and let some people come up and ask a question that they have. Da Vinci, I know you've been dying to have.
It's more of a comment. It's just I have a different view.
Sure. What's your comment?
I mean, it's a totally different view.
Step up that way.
Which way?
This way. Oh, is the mic working? Oh no, yo, stand right there. Yeah, you cool. Yeah.
Well, I just feel like I'm in a room with a bunch of these guys, and I think that at the end of the day, what's being left out of the dialogue right now is that you have to attach funds to whatever your agenda is. Like we're not having a discussion about how to appropriately lobby. We're not, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want these people to get into these offices and support whatever your views are, you're going to have to group yourselves, and you're going to have to start sourcing your funds and putting it behind it, because these races, they are these, when I say races, I mean actual campaign races.
Right.
They are not cheap. I'm generally the Oliver Stone for black folks when it comes to this type of deal, and creating ads and running them. It's expensive. So if you're not putting money behind it, you're just thinking that I would have wished that you guys would have taken away that out of the Trump elections, that the popular vote means as much as you paid for it. You've got to put your dollars behind it, and you have to make it work.
Well, Cagle spent more than Kemp.
Yeah.
In this past election, and he lost.
And Trump spent less than Hillary, so
Exactly.
I don't really know if it's about dollars. I think it's about raising awareness and getting bodies to the poll.
Yeah.
And so even Trump, he spent his 40 years building a following, a hardcore base. And then he used the media to push his message, which he's continuing to do.
The real media or the fake news?
No, he didn't spend any
Either
money on
one.
advertising.
Which one did
he
he
didn't
use?
have to.
Either one.
Right.
So I think that we have to think outside the box. We can throw money, dollars after dollars after dollars, but if the people that are voting aren't listening, like the polls that said Hillary's going to win, but when the people were lying to the pollsters. So I think we got to. It's a new paradigm out here. We got to reach those recalcitrant voters and get them to the polls. 40 million people decided to take the day off, and we can never have that happen again.
Do you feel like the polls were actually lying to the people, or they were just actually incorrect? Because one thing I noticed while I was out there canvassing at that moment was
2016.
If you actually spoke to people outside, they were really indifferent from the jump. You know what I mean? And maybe if you to ask them in a straw, just hey, who you gonna vote for? Probably the person I know most who seems safe is Hillary.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they was actually gonna go out there for that.
Nobody was excited about vote, and
I'll tell you, it was a hold your nose situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing that we have to really grasp is that no one is going after the marginalized voters on the Democratic side. There is no messaging that is directly positioned to, my grandmama made homemade cakes. The best part of the cake was what was left on the bowl, the cake mix, and we like to lick the bowl. I like to lick the bowl. Nobody's licking the bowl of voters. Nobody's getting that cake mix that's left in that bowl.
I like that.
And I don't think
Licking
we
the bowl.
understand that is probably the tastiest sweet spot of this whole voting base that we are not addressing. That is going to be your die-hard voter. My people are from Montgomery, Alabama, and they lived and died to vote. I'm embarrassed if I don't vote. My feet are held to the fire about that, and I'm very passionate about it. I want to also speak to the fact of earned media. Trump is the master of earned media and continues to be the master of earned media. And until Democrats know how to speak to our issues and know how to garner the correct and go after earned media the correct way, there's so much happening in our communities that we should really have no problem going after earned media, and we are not.
And the young lady in New York that just won that,
Alexia,
I mean, the other Democrat outspent her 10-1.
Exactly.
He had been 20 years in politics. So she did it on a shoestring budget by her boot, literally knocking on people's doors, and like Cass said, licking that sweet spot in the bowl. She's talking to the people that nobody else is talking to. That people are forgetting, and that's what Trump did. He did it with his own base. That's his core base. All those people that watch Fox News 24/7, where the only place they get their news. He knew how to tap into that, and how he went about doing it is still being questioned. But that's not the point. He did it and got away with it. Yeah. So,
then I worked for Bernie Sanders 2016. Our average voter gave monthly $5. $5
for an independent candidate.
And he raised a lot of money. Go ahead.
Oh, hold on, Mike, get right behind her, please. Yeah, Hollywood, go ahead and knock out your question. Mike, you'll be right next.
Great. Hey, y'all, this is Hollywood.
Hey.
So I'm pretty familiar with all of you guys, and to answer one of the questions you guys asked, like how should politicians get more involved, you guys know the answer, and I'm proud of you because it's getting out and talking to the people. It's not about the money. If you have to worry about their light bill, their water bill, X, Y, Z, who cares who's on TV and who's going to do what? And like you said, if they can't even get to the voting poll, then it really doesn't matter who they vote for if you need bus fare or gas money. Right. So if we're going to mobilize people, then we need to do it in a unionized effort, if that's even a word, a unified effort. So we can mobilize our communities. We see what the issue is, and we could talk about it all day, but now the question is, what are we going to do about it collectively to make sure they actually do it?
That's
So
right.
then again, I commend y'all because I know you're actually doing something, but that's the question really everybody else needs to ask themselves. What can I personally do in my community to make it matter? And the only reason I care about voting is what Cash just said. There are ancestors who died just so we could vote. I don't care about voting. I don't care about who's running. I care about how my life does getting paid.
Absolutely.
But if people died just so we could do this, we would be really, really, really disappointed in our ancestors if we don't do something.
Wait, hold on. Brian Kemp, don't threaten to pay her light bill. that might be a vote for her. Don't do that.
He know how to spend.
He'll come find your social
Obviously.
media.
If Kim
Right.
win against Kim, I'm voting for Killmonger.
Mike, go ahead, man.
He's a strong leader.
Yeah. That's my man Mike. Hip Hop Gives Back. What's up, Mike?
Good. I want to take this a different direction.
Sure.
I use cannabis to heal myself through cancer.
Which I just learned about too. Crazy, I didn't know that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
clearly I didn't know that
testimony.
about you.
That's right.
And there's plenty of other people as well that currently I'm
That's right.
in
Right.
consultation with.
That's right.
And I'm not using the oils or anything as of yet. But here's my question. So recently, I seen that the Supreme Court ruled that we would lose our ability to own a firearm.
That's right.
And my
California.
question to you guys is, how does that change the course of your push? Or is it just one of them things we just okay with giving up in order to get it? Because I'm not a fan of losing my right to shoot
Absolutely.
in order for that. So I feel like for me, I'll stay on the street level if that's what I have to do in order to keep my fire.
So
This is-
that's in California, right? That just happened
We
in
had it
California.
in Colorado when I was there, so
Okay.
it was a strange mix of activists. You had African Americans who were really pushing for minority inclusion in the industry, and you had NRA and gun rights folks who were pro cannabis. So you had a very, very conservative sect and a very progressive sect, and there was no meeting of the minds, to be honest. Because what the conservatives were afraid of were a bunch of minorities running around with guns high.
Yeah.
But they think if they're high with their guns, it's
It's
okay.
okay.
So it's just a whole, it's a socialization of that decision that I think that gives a social paradigm that I don't know. You would have to deconstruct the very issue of racism to really attack that on a national level. I think that's conversations that we are heading towards in this climate having, but we ain't there.
And it's so difficult because I saw one lady who posted that she went ahead and she received the medical marijuana card, but she doesn't smoke. She did it
Yeah.
to support the cause. So she loses her right as well. She doesn't
Yep.
even smoke. You know what I mean? So it's
Or
so,
use it.
It's kind of baffling to me, but
It
I
is.
just wanted to pose that
That's just my.
question.
And that goes back to the local votes as well.
Yeah.
Because
wild.
we elect our local judges, we elect those people that make those decisions. Because right now, that's not a federal decision; that's a local state decision.
It is a.
State, the state, not the federal. I thought it was California and Colorado that brought it up. It wasn't a federal.
I mean, if we
the
talking
federal
about
Supreme
if we
Court.
talking about Georgia,
Isn't that a
because
DEA thing?
no,
No.
Well, no, because the Supreme Court of the United States has not ruled on that. I think you're talking about state, and then
It's
in
California.
Georgia, it doesn't matter anyway. If you're convicted of possessing more than an ounce of marijuana, you're gonna lose the right to possess a firearm anyway, because
Yes.
you're gonna lose all of your civil rights. So I'm confused where this conversation is even going, because on a state level,
In Georgia, yeah.
it's illegal to possess marijuana, period. And then if you possess more than an ounce, it's a felony where you lose all your civil rights anyway.
Yeah.
Chris, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so I just want, and that's a key point. They just hit on that. Everybody shared on is that education is key, and so therefore we have so many miseducated people. We have so many unmotivated people, and especially with our young people, because of that lack of motivation, has smeared what system that you were brought up on to
That's right.
understand.
Yes.
We don't care anything about it. So therefore, we're talking about mobilizing and engaging during election time. But nobody holds accountability and do the things of engaging
That's
during
right.
the actual years that people are actually in office. So therefore, it's kind of like an oxymoron type of situation. And it's like, I get tired of seeing, I feel like, I'm independent.
Yeah.
Even though I identify as a Democrat, But in my thinking and rationalization, why am I Democrat? Because I was taught to be a Democrat.
That's right.
This is all
Passed
I know.
down,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? When I got a chance to think for myself, it's just like saying, you know, what have the Democratic Party done for us
That's right.
in the last 50 years? And it's not a question about people, it's just a question to ask. And it's to say, like, there's no independent ballot. There's no, you know, so what are we doing? We have to re-energize the system. And, I mean, and it starts with the local system.
That's right.
And then we can inspire the bigger system to believe about engaging growth.
That's right.
That's right.
So we're trying to do.
Yeah. Hold on, Kim and Kim, Stanley, and then Coach. There you go.
So I know you guys were saying how getting to the people and talking to the people. I think that the hip hop used to be a tool that was used for politics.
Yes.
Still is.
That was the news of the streets or whatever. You really don't hear it that much.
Right.
That's how at once upon a time we were listening to like 80s, 90s hip hop when we got here.
Right.
That was how people were reached and made it popular. Bernie Sanders had Killer Mike on his campaign.
Absolutely.
They reached the people. Those little $5 contributions that were coming in from the Obama campaign, that's what made him get to where he was. Just awareness.
Yeah.
When you talk about stuff like that in pop culture, it makes people aware of it.
Yeah.
When you make those references in those songs, it makes people go research.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I had this, and this, if this doesn't scare people, like,
Brian
I'm
Kemp.
from New Jersey, but I moved
Who is
to
that?
Brian Kemp with the shotgun on his
This is a
lap.
picture
Yeah, I
of
saw
from
that.
from his
Commercial.
I mean, the Second Amendment, and like you said, getting to those people that are on the
Scary.
Trump base,
Yeah.
to appealing to all those people about their gun rights and all that stuff is how they're going to win.
Exactly.
We have to find where our sweet spot is and reach those people as soon as possible.
I like that.
Because
Yeah.
it's like your life, I mean, this is, in this commercial, he's pointing a gun at somebody that wants to date his daughter. Like, this is not somebody that's breaking his house.
That's his daughter's boyfriend.
So when you're talking to the people that are like, yeah, I need to have my dinner, like you said, it goes back to history about why this makes people so afraid and why that like, it ignites that fire in them.
Absolutely.
It goes back in history, but we definitely have to find a way to reach people in the street that are not into politics, that don't believe in voting, some kind of way make that popular again.
And I'm hoping, you're absolutely right. I'm hoping that this cannabis issue is going to be that hot button issue.
Yeah.
All of us consume it. And so it's about educating the medicinal purposes of it. That Dr. Uma Dhanabalan says famously, there's no such thing as recreational and medicinal marijuana.
It's just
There's
marijuana.
just marijuana.
Yeah.
If there's a system in our bodies that actually feed off of the cannabinoids in the plant to help our immune system function normally, then all of us need cannabis. And so it is not about whether or not you're using it to forget your problems or self-medicate or kill cancer. It's about educating it's about talking to these kids and letting them know that you're using it because it's accessible, because you can afford to go to a doctor and get anxiety medication. And this plant doesn't kill people. It doesn't kill you when you use it. So its rate of use, because it's been used for thousands of years, is still around for that reason, because of that reason. And so we have to stop calling it a drug, because that's not what it is.
Stop calling it weed.
It's medicine. it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
medicine, and you know that is where the education. I'm hoping. You know, I see that we've lost empathy. This generation, the younger and younger they get, they could care less. They could care less if their grandmother is dying on the couch because she's taking the pills that were prescribed to her that are legal, but every other organ in her body is shutting down. And you look at her funny because she's smoking weed. You know what I'm saying? We've lost our sense of empathy for people. And so if you don't personally need it, think about the person, the 8-month-old baby that has a rare epileptic disorder, that the 20 prescription pills he was taking daily did not work to stop his seizures. And this 1-ounce bottle of oil does a better job of stopping his seizures than any pill he was ever prescribed.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me you can't feel empathy for that baby and want to vote for somebody that is willing to provide safe access for that baby to get his medicine.
No, I totally understand.
So here's the thing,
Yeah.
and I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm looking at that picture. We have a messaging problem, because I agree with everything you just said, but you have to condense it down to a 6th grade level to
Make it
get
very
it to the voters.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that you kept saying in that soliloquy, that diatribe, was medicine and healthcare.
Yeah.
Okay. Georgia is one of the few states that does not have Medicaid expansion. If we start talking about access to good health, you will reach a lot of people. And that's where we lose. It's the messaging on a fundamental level.
Kindergarten level.
Yes.
Yes.
And I agree with Nicole that, you know, cannabis as an issue is a galvanizing issue. And that's, as an organization, we see it as a first step because it's an issue that crosses kind of all political lines, all demographic lines, and people understand it. You know, 65% of Georgians have already said we're ready to legalize, which begs the question of why it's not
Exactly.
more commonly talked about by our legislators.
Right.
But I think that, you know, some of the points get to the issue of when we're talking with legislators about the details of policy, we have to be comprehensive and understand all the details, because if you're not paying attention, they can slip something in that takes away people's rights for participating. And to your point earlier about licensing, you know, an important part of when we create the cannabis industry and the hemp industry, you have to create these social equity programs to provide people with access who've been cut off of that industry, or, you know, who've been criminalized for participating in it. And you have to make sure that they're not putting license limits that are designed to keep people out and put the people who were, you know, lined up behind the legislators. And that's what happened in North Carolina. And it's keeping people out, and it's, you know, preventing free trade, free market, which is what people are saying.
And if I can speak to that just quickly, that's one important thing that we're working on with policy with Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We have an initiative where we actually have developed language that supports minority inclusion, social equity programs in existing markets. Like we're starting with Colorado and Nevada. We're making sure that our congressional black caucuses in these states, that we're lobbying them, that we're meeting with them, and we're aggressively pursuing social equity and minority inclusion. These are going to be licensure requirements for reissuance of licensing and for even acquiring a license. And our belief is that minority inclusion and social equity should be a topic at the policy synthesis.
Not
an afterthought. And so that is something that I have really initiated as Director of Public Policy and Research with Roz McCarthy, and we're really aggressively going after that, even in Georgia, in the formative stage of our law.
Got it. Hey, Stanley, go ahead.
Just to circle back a little bit back to the firearms and cannabis side of things. We have some close contacts in Oregon, and as we know, there are pro-gun state in Oregon. You know, we had NRA guys have a standoff.
That's a malicious state. Yes, that's what they are.
So with the political advocacy there, I was asking them what was their comprehensive approach to firearm owning and cannabis, and they were like, pretty much the dynamic right now is don't bring it up. And the reason for that, because most people aren't even thinking about that. They're so far off the plan. Who's going to have license? Our kids going to be eating edibles. Nobody's thought about the gun owners. I'm a proud gun owner. I train gun safety. I'm a veteran. Most gun owners are responsible that I know. But nobody ever brings up alcohol and firearms.
I was going to say, I'd much rather have a cannabis smoker with a gun. Much rather.
Great point.
And the two store workers are holding an AR-15 in the picture. And I'm like, you telling me AR-15 and moonshine, that makes more sense. Really? And so, keep separate for now, because there have been some cases that I have actually followed online to where people were prosecuted, and it went through, because when you fill out that firearm application, when you go down, it says, are you addicted to any of the illegal marijuana, heroin, this and that? And technically, even though you have a license for it, that saying is, yes, I have a license for it, I use it, technically I'm addicted. When you check no, if anybody ever wants to just cross-reference that, they can look and see, wait a minute, this person's buying guns, and it's in this face, slide this to the guy out of this office, and they can follow that. And the right person gets away with that. Because it is federally mandated that it's still federally illegal, although on a state level, it is legalized. So federal always trumps state.
Right.
And so, and also about the education, everybody's absolutely correct, because it's miseducation. So now we have to work on re-education.
That's right.
Because as far as politics, we've been so dealing with reactive politics. This happened, let's react to it. Okay, this happened, let's react to it. We need to work on progressive politics. We need to be proactive in politics. Look at the candidates who are progressive. Look at the candidates who are doing, who are going to other cities, other states.
That's right.
Looking at their policies, procedures. Hey, how can we implement that in technology?
Absolutely.
How can we start from the cellular level with the people that need it the most.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
And as far as education on the cannabis level, you have people here in the state who are advocates, minorities for medical marijuana. You have myself. There are a lot of people here that our primary focus is education. Because you can have all the dispensaries you want, all the licenses you want, all the ancillary businesses. But once they open the doors, there's going to be that first rush of clients. And then you're going to notice it trickling off because people are like, man, this stuff's expensive.
I'll go back to guy around the corner. Yeah.
And not just the initial education, but the continuance of education for patients. Because many of the physicians are just writing a card. Hey, let's take a card, and then, hey, see you later. Because there is no program. What about follow-up? If they did get their hands on some oil, is it working for them? What are the follow-up programs? Because Georgia medical program, as it stands, is not even a contract program. It's a research program.
That's right.
And it was only for 3 years. Of course, they're going to extend it. But at the end of it, they can say, okay, the research didn't work. We're going to end it.
Yeah,
And
we're not qualified
as
as
the
a
didactic
marijuana
research
state.
that we had.
Yeah.
The Georgia Medical Cannabis Office ran like 2 people.
Yeah.
So that's why we're working together, and we're putting together the plans to implement this at the cellular level to expand this to the organ level, and that's the entire state.
Awesome, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna do one last question, and I'm gonna let everybody, kind of mix and mingle after this. So,
Get into the conversation with you guys.
do your thing, man.
I'm looking
Oh, introduce yourself too. That's my man, Coach.
Well, how y'all doing today? My name is Nicole Harris, but everybody calls me Coach. And the conversation that you guys are having is like one I think I had with most of the people I might have smoked a blunt with. And that was, again, a revolution. How come we wind up holding Atlanta down to make sure that no people from the outside come in and take care of the work that the people have actually been doing the work? You know what I'm saying? You got people who've been in the game for a minute, and we're doing it. But my question was, what do we have going on that is one unit that we all can say, we've been in it from the beginning? Because ain't no different people. It's all us. We're the same people. Who's sitting at the table with the legislators? Who got the conversation of the game plan down, saying, we ready to go forward with this, and we're acting for our diversity and our equity. Like my man said, excuse my language, he white. And he telling y'all gotta have organizations.
Excuse my language.
In fact, when we started teaming up, I was teaming certain people up with certain organizations just to come in so we can all run this here.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You got people who come in here making money and charging for bull crap. And not educating us and not making our industry better at all.
Say that louder.
They're gonna come and get credit like they doing something in here, like they balling.
That's right.
So it's not until most of the people in this room, I'm telling you, my man, I got the game plan of this right here. And I didn't even know how you get it, but you've been rocking it so hard, I ain't even said that to you. Because you rocking it, bro. So my thing is, we got the people here to take a move. My man, me and you was at Washington, you don't even remember me, but I remember how hard you were because of the bird that was coming out the Kaepernick thing. I said, my brother, I'm gonna get to you sooner or later, but we got here. Cass is an excellent leader, but I refuse to let somebody else come here like they utilize, like they running this stuff, and then put us on the back end like we ain't doing what we supposed to be doing, and we are. Nobody in the country, listen to me, man, go to all these events y'all want to go to. It could be hemp, it could be cannabis. Ain't none of them got legislators at the table like we do here in Atlanta. They want to help us out with the plan, and they begging for this shit. They want events with this shit. And they don't know how to do it, bro. They don't know what, and I ain't getting racist with it, but I'm trying to tell you. Man, I was going and this is one last thing before I say it.
Yeah.
It ain't that they not letting us in. Quit with the bullshit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I went out there to Oklahoma, I went out there to Kansas, I went out there, bro. If we ain't there, we just ain't going there asking or putting our foot in there.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? We can't say that they're not letting us in something that we're not taking our ass out there and getting in and be a part of.
You know what? And
if we're not doing it, you can't say that.
I can speak to that because, I told you earlier when I was speaking to Marvin Washington that he brought up the point of how when we were at the MJ Biz conference, there were exactly 7 black people there. And he said, I know that because I counted it, and 2 of them were me and him. And I thought that in myself. I was like, we're in New Orleans. Like, what is happening to where people are not just actively saying, I want to learn more about this? And again, it goes back to why you're not seeing people more in politics. We are looking at generations, not just one generation. We're looking at generations now who are over it. That's why I can tell you they're really over the conversations. They're over the lack of action. They're over just what you're seeing repeated on the news. They're very much over that. We have to cut through the nonsense we keep saying, and like you say, we got to come up with a new script. It got to be a lot shorter, a lot to the point, and we got to really start targeting the people who actually need to be out there. There are people out here who are dying because they're not voting. and don't even understand that they're dying. Right. You're complaining about gentrification, but don't understand that you don't even know who your city council person is. You don't even know who redistricts your neighborhood.
That's right.
Don't tell me about what you're going to do when cannabis gets legalized, and you don't even know who's deciding if you could even have it here.
Well, if you wait until it gets legal, then you waited too long.
But my point is this: that I want to leave out on is. It is a re-education process, and it starts with ourselves. That we have to re-educate ourselves on, one, the importance of voting, and two, who is going to be in front of us and why we're voting for these people. Yeah. It's not as simple as I'm voting for the black woman. It's not as simple as I'm voting for the cannabis candidate. I'm voting for somebody who's going to help make my life better.
That's right.
And I need people to fully understand that part, and I want people to walk away with that much knowledge of themselves there tonight. That you need to re-educate yourself on the importance of voting. Bypass what you see on social media from people who are going to tell you all day what doesn't count and what does count. When I'm looking at, again, you don't even know your city council member. Right. Don't tell me about your neighborhood. Don't tell me why you're upset that your neighborhood doesn't look the same. Right. You can care less. That's as far as I'm concerned. I want us to re-educate ourselves across the board and understand who we are voting for, because that's a very important thing. It cannot be blindly going through, holding your nose and just clicking buttons no more. Absolutely. I want to leave on that point. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight who witnessed this. Thank everybody who participated.
Thank you, one more thing, Mecca. I just want to add, October 9th is the deadline to register to vote, y'all. October 9th.
Yes, reiterate that.
October 9th is the last day to register for the November 6th election, where we will vote for governor. If you do not know whether or not you're registered to vote, visit gavotes.org. And put in your information.
Or my voter page.
Or my voter page. Go to my voter page.
Which is the mvp.sos.ga.gov. The my voter page, it'll tell you if you're registered, and it'll tell you your polling precinct. Right. And again, it'll give you all the deadlines for the upcoming vote. And I want to just disagree a little bit.
What's up?
If you just get into politics and you want to be a single issue voter, because gun rights people are single issue voters, pick a candidate that's on that one single issue and hold them accountable for that one single issue, and then move to the next issue. But you got to get to the polls. There's no excuse.
I agree with you.
There's no excuse at all.
I agree with you. I'm not going to argue it. I just feel like don't vote for one person because they voted on this one point and then you stuck with that. You know what I mean? Like make sure you're not stuck on that. Because I've heard Trump say he's for legalization, but you're also for criminalizing kids. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to vote for you because you say you pro legalization, but you got a bunch of illegal immigrant children missing around this country. That's not going to make me feel better.
But his one issue was bringing jobs back to America and keep America first.
Oh, that got him voted.
The reason why he's deporting children is because they're not American first. Yeah. So he really did appeal to single issue voters.
Yeah,
with that one issue.
Yeah.
But again, that's a conversation for later. Herb, I'm not going to hold you up all night. I thank everybody for listening in. Again, subscribe to the Cash Color Canvas podcast on Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you keep up with all episodes. Get the Live Hip Hop Daily app so you can watch us live every Tuesday at 9 p.m. on Live Hip Hop Daily. It's Cash Color Cannabis, a higher level of conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Becca.